Well, ever since the first communication teacher started teaching better communication skills, I'm sure they started thinking about assessment. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, is how we do assessment. And while most of our assessment tools were written assessments, we decided that since we were the communication department that we should look at some oral assessments or verbal assessments. So we began to develop some of those, and obviously the first where we were going to look for was public speaking, since that was really the bread and butter of our discipline. So we began to tape speeches at the beginning of the semester and at the end of the semester, and we started to incorporate other objectives for our communication. For example, we looked at historical speeches, or we looked at great American speeches. We looked at freedom of speech, which was actually something we wanted to do. And one of the things that we began to look on as we had these presentations come up and as the speeches came up was that not all of our students were as effective as other students. That some of these people, when they looked at great American speakers, they didn't know who great American speakers were. Or when they looked at freedom of speech, they really didn't know how to articulate themselves very well. And so we found that that was a good, useful learning tool in looking at how those speeches would do. But it was very obvious that when we took a student in on the very first day and taped them, and that they had some very good learning curves in which they could achieve. And when we got to the end of the semester, we didn't have to use any kind of a written rubric to know that our students had improved. We saw characteristics such as delivery, use of gestures, use of movement. We saw organizational skills like use of introductions, use of attention getters, use of transitions, were all part of that evaluation tool that we could do in public speaking. But there were limitations because the communication discipline was much larger or much broader than just public speaking. So we started to look at other ways in which we could do it. And we thought, well, logically, that if you're a communication student, we thought that you needed to be able to go out and to communicate orally or verbally what was it that you were learning in class. So we started with learning outcome interviews, and learning outcome interviews was basically bringing the students in and sitting down and taking our learning outcomes from the course outline and turning them into questions and just basically asking the students what had they learned in class. We began taping these learning outcomes to be used in such things as the slow outsource, slow assessment day, beginning to use these in evaluation of kind of what we were doing. And again, it was very interesting to see how the students really would take learning outcomes and be able to apply them to their everyday lives. And that was really an important outcome for us. Theory application, not only learning something in the classroom, but being able to take that learning outcome and apply it in the workplace environment or apply it in a social type of environment. And so we found that the learning outcomes, while it had some limitations because there were so many areas that learning outcomes really didn't cover, was basically something that we could really evaluate through some kind of a module and look at they were achieving learning outcomes. So we began then to develop this idea into what was called theory application speeches. And a theory application speech kind of combined the ideas that we were looking for in public speaking with actually what had they learned in a classroom. Now, one of the courses that we used this for was our Introduction to Human Communication course. That course only has one speech at the end of the semester, so it was hard to adapt that kind of before and after format that we do in our public speaking classes. So basically at the end of the semester, as we opened our unit on public speaking, what we asked them to do is go back over the semester, take a unit such as nonverbal communication or listening or language application, to pick concepts out of there and to present a speech. And basically it was a twofold speech. One, they had to define or explain or teach the concept, and second, they had to apply that concept. So where do we go from here? This semester we began using what was called class interviews. And this is a very informal session in which we basically bring students up to the front of the classroom and I engage in a question and answer session. And so basically what they have to do is, in a very impromptu type manner, ask questions. And it really became very evident that you either knew your stuff and could apply it and could talk about it, or you didn't know your stuff. So one of the things that we really begin to see as communications instructor is that it's not enough just simply to be able to put on paper what you've learned in the class. You have to be able to go out there into the community and discuss and talk about what it is. And I think that anybody that teaches in a classroom would say that that would be an objective that we would like to do. So as long as the objective is to teach people how to communicate, we'll continue to look at ways to assess communication. Thank you.